When galactic tyrants tried to edit our DNA, they accidentally unleashed humanity's true power. The research vessel Darwin drifted through the void between stars, its hull gleaming under the distant light of Proxima Centauri. Dr. Priya Sharma pressed her palm against the observation deck's reinforced viewport, watching the cosmic dance of stellar debris that marked the boundary of explored space. Her dark eyes reflected the starlight as she contemplated the irony. Humanity's most advanced genetic research vessel, named after the father of evolutionary theory, venturing into territories where evolution itself might take on entirely new meanings. Still can't sleep. Captain Robert Hayes emerged from the shadows of the corridor, his weathered face bearing the familiar lines of someone who'd spent decades navigating the treacherous waters between known and unknown space. Priya turned, offering a weary smile. The data from the Kepler 442b samples keeps running through my head. We're looking at genetic sequences that shouldn't exist, complexity that defies everything we thought we knew about evolutionary limitations. Hayes moved to stand beside her, his reflection joining hers in the viewport. At 52, he carried himself with the measured confidence of a man who'd learned that space held infinite capacity for surprise. Maybe that's exactly why we're out here, to have our assumptions challenged. The captain's words proved more prophetic than either could have imagined. Within the hour, proximity alarms began shrieking throughout the Darwin, their piercing wails cutting through the ship's usual mechanical hum like a blade through silk. "Captain, to the bridge." The voice of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen crackled through the intercom, tension evident even through the static. "We have an unidentified vessel approaching at impossible velocity." Hayes and Priya exchanged glances before sprinting toward the bridge, their footsteps echoing through corridors that suddenly felt far too narrow. The Darwin had been designed for research, not combat. Its defensive capabilities were minimal, relying primarily on speed and stealth to avoid confrontation. The bridge erupted in controlled chaos as they arrived. Chen stood at the tactical station, her fingers dancing across holographic displays that painted the approaching threat in stark, unforgiving detail. "Sir, the vessel is approximately 3 kilometers in length, composition unknown. It appeared on our sensors less than 2 minutes ago, but trajectory analysis suggests it's been tracking us for hours." "How is that possible?" Hayes demanded, settling into his command chair while Priya took her position at the science station. "Unknown, sir. The ship seems to exist in some kind of sensor shadow. Our instruments can detect it now, but only because it's allowing us to." Priya's hands flew over her console, analyzing the energy signatures emanating from the alien vessel. What she saw made her blood run cold. "Captain, I'm reading massive bioelectrical activity. This isn't just a ship, it's alive, or at least partially organic." The main view screen flickered, then filled with an image that would haunt the crew's nightmares for years to come. The alien vessel resembled a massive organism more than any human conception of spacecraft. Its surface undulated with rhythmic pulses, and bioluminescent patterns raced along its hull like neural pathways firing in some cosmic brain. "Incoming transmission," reported Communications Officer Torres, his voice barely steady. On screen. The image that materialized before them challenged every assumption about alien intelligence. The being that appeared stood nearly 3 meters tall, its elongated limbs ending in appendages that seemed to shift between fingers and surgical instruments. Its skin held an opalescent quality, shifting through spectrums of color that human eyes could barely process. Most disturbing were its eyes, multifaceted like an insect's, but with an intelligence that felt ancient and utterly alien. "Greetings, primitive ones," the creature spoke, its voice somehow transmitted directly into their minds rather than through their ears. "I am bioarchitect Zalthus of the Genuri Collective. Your species has been selected for genetic optimization." Hayes stood slowly, every instinct screaming danger. I'm Captain Robert Hayes of the Earth vessel Darwin. We're on a peaceful research mission. We have no quarrel with your people. Zalthus tilted its head in a gesture that might have been amusement. Quarrel? You misunderstand. We do not seek conflict, we seek improvement. Your species displays fascinating genetic diversity but also troubling instabilities. We shall correct these flaws. We don't need correcting, Priya interjected, stepping forward despite Hayes' warning gesture. As the ship's chief geneticist, she felt compelled to defend humanity's biological heritage. Our genetic diversity is our strength, not a weakness. The alien's multifaceted eyes focused on her with unsettling intensity. Ah, a practitioner of primitive genetic arts. How? Quaint. You will be most instructive during the optimization process. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. That silence lasted exactly 17 seconds before the Darwin shuddered under the impact of some kind of energy field. Emergency, lighting bathed everything in crimson as the ship systems began failing one by one. They're pulling us in, Chen reported, her voice tight with controlled panic. Some kind of tractor field, but it's interfacing directly with our ship systems. It's like they're rewriting our computer code in real time. Hayes gripped his command chair as the deck tilted beneath them. All hands, prepare for boarding. This is not a drill. But preparation proved futile against technology that operated on principles beyond human understanding. The Genuri didn't board the Darwin so much as absorb it, their vessel's organic hull flowing around the human ship like a living membrane. Within minutes, the research vessel found itself embedded within the alien craft's biomechanical interior. The crew's capture was swift and efficient. Gas flooded the corridors, not toxic, but something that left them conscious while rendering resistance impossible. Priya found herself unable to move as alien figures glided through the ship, their movements too fluid to be entirely natural. They collected the crew with the methodical precision of scientists gathering specimens. The holding area where they awakened defied easy description. The walls pulsed with organic rhythms, and the air itself seemed alive, carrying scents that triggered primal fears buried deep in human DNA. 43 crew members found themselves arranged in individual cells that resembled cocoons more than traditional prison chambers. Is everyone accounted for? Hayes called out, his voice echoing strangely in the biomechanical space. All present, sir, Chen responded from a nearby cell. But I'm reading some kind of energy field around each containment unit. We're not just imprisoned, we're being scanned. Priya pressed her hands against the translucent membrane that formed her cell wall. The material felt warm and slightly yielding, like living tissue. They're analyzing our genetic structure, she realized with growing horror. Each cell is a diagnostic chamber. As if summoned by her words, Zalthus materialized in the central area, its form seeming to phase through the ship's organic walls. The preliminary scans are complete, it announced, its mental voice carrying undertones of satisfaction. Your species presents unique challenges, but nothing beyond our capabilities. What do you want with us? Hayes demanded. Want? Zalthus seemed genuinely puzzled by the question. We want nothing. We provide a service genetic optimization for species too primitive to achieve it themselves. Your DNA contains numerous inefficiencies, redundant sequences, non-coding regions, chaotic diversity that leads to unpredictable outcomes. We shall correct these flaws. Priya felt ice forming in her stomach. You're talking about forced genetic modification. That's not optimization, it's genocide. Genocide implies destruction, the alien replied with what might have been patience. We preserve and improve. The Kethmari were violent and chaotic before our intervention. Now they serve as perfect agricultural specialists. The Vexani were consumed by individual ambition. We modified their neural chemistry to prioritize collective harmony. Each species we encounter becomes more than it was. More according to your definition, Hayes said, his voice carrying the steel that had made him one of Earth's most respected deep space captains. "What gives you the right to decide what any species should become?" Zalthus's multifaceted eyes shifted through spectrums of color that suggested deep thought. "Right. We possess the capability, therefore we possess the responsibility. Your species will thank us when the process is complete. The modifications will eliminate aggression, reduce genetic diseases, and standardize your capabilities for optimal efficiency." The bioarchitect gestured, and the walls around them began to change. New structures emerged from the organic matrix, devices that looked disturbingly like surgical equipment crossed with organic growths. "The process begins now. Do not resist, it will only prolong the discomfort." What followed challenged every assumption the Genuri had made about human biology. The modification process they perfected on dozens of species relied on identifying key genetic markers and systematically altering them to achieve desired behavioral and physical changes. Their techniques had proven universally successful because most species they'd encountered possessed relatively straightforward genetic architectures. Humanity, however, was different in ways that wouldn't become apparent until the modifications were already underway. The first sign of trouble came from Ensign Marcus Webb, a young engineer whose genetic profile had seemed unremarkable during initial scans. As the alien biomachines began their work, introducing carefully crafted genetic modifications designed to reduce aggression and increase compliance, Webb's body began to change in unexpected ways. "Something's wrong," Priya observed, watching through her cell's membrane as Webb convulsed within his containment unit. "The modifications aren't taking hold the way they should." Zalthus moved closer to Webb's cell, its instruments extending to take new readings. For the first time since their capture, the alien's mental voice carried notes of confusion. Anomalous interactions detected. The subject's non-coding DNA sequences are interfering with the modification process. Non-coding DNA. Priya's scientific mind raced despite their dire circumstances. "You mean what we used to call junk DNA?" "Junk?" The alien's confusion deepened. "These sequences serve no apparent function, yet they comprise nearly 98% of the human genome. Our models assumed they were evolutionary detritus." A terrible understanding began to dawn on Priya. "They're not junk. We just don't understand their function yet. Human genetic diversity isn't a flaw, it's a feature. Our DNA contains backup systems, alternative pathways, dormant capabilities that activate under specific conditions." As if to prove her point, Webb's convulsions suddenly stopped. He opened his eyes, and they blazed with an inner light that definitely hadn't been there before. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through the ship's organic structure. "I can hear it," he whispered, then louder. "I can hear the ship thinking." Zalthus recoiled, its instruments withdrawing as if burned. Impossible. The modifications were designed to suppress neural activity, not enhance it. But Webb was already changing further. His hands pressed against his cell's membrane, and where he touched, the biomechanical material began to respond. Not breaking, responding. The ship's organic systems recognized something in his modified genetics, something that registered as authorized access. "The modifications are interacting with dormant human genetic sequences," Priya realized, her voice rising with excitement and terror. "You're not suppressing our capabilities, you're unlocking them." The transformation spread rapidly through the captured crew. Each modification the Genuri attempted triggered unexpected cascades within human DNA. Lieutenant Chen found her reflexes enhanced to superhuman levels, her nervous system processing information at speeds that allowed her to perceive individual photons of light. Chief Engineer Rodriguez discovered he could interface directly with the ship's biomechanical systems, understanding their function through some kind of genetic empathy. Most dramatically affected was Captain Hayes himself. The modifications intended to eliminate his leadership instincts instead awakened something primal and powerful. His presence began to radiate an almost palpable authority that even the ship's organic system seemed to recognize and respond to. "Stop the process," Zalthus commanded its biomachines, but it was too late. The modifications had already been introduced, and human genetics were proving far more complex and adaptable than anyone had anticipated. "You don't understand," Priya said, her own enhanced awareness allowing her to perceive the genetic changes rippling through her body. "Human DNA isn't just a blueprint, it's a library. Millions of years of evolutionary history, dormant capabilities preserved for exactly this kind of situation. You've just given us the keys to unlock our own potential." The escape began not with violence, but with understanding. Webb, his consciousness now partially merged with the ship's biomechanical systems, began to comprehend the vessel's organic architecture. He discovered that the Genuri ship wasn't just alive. It was a collective organism, its various systems linked through bioelectrical networks that could be influenced by the right genetic signals. "I can feel the ship's pain," Webb reported, his enhanced senses detecting distress signals throughout the organic matrix. "It doesn't want to be doing this. The ship itself is as much a prisoner as we are." Hayes, his leadership instincts now enhanced to almost supernatural levels, began coordinating the crew's efforts. "Can you communicate with it?" "Already am," Webb replied, his hands pressed against the cell membrane. "It's been enslaved by the Genuri for centuries, forced to participate in their genetic modifications against its will. It wants to be free." The plan that emerged was audacious in its simplicity. Rather than fighting the ship systems, they would liberate them. Webb's enhanced abilities allowed him to communicate with the vessel's organic consciousness, while other crew members used their newfound capabilities to interface with different ship systems. Chen, her reflexes now operating at near-light speed, began systematically overriding the containment fields. Her movements were too fast for the Genuri monitoring systems to track, appearing as mere blurs on their sensors. Rodriguez established communication with the ship's biomechanical maintenance systems, convincing them to recognize the human crew as authorized personnel rather than prisoners. But it was Priya who made the crucial breakthrough. Her enhanced genetic awareness allowed her to understand something fundamental about the Genuri themselves. They weren't the masters they pretended to be. They were parasites, using their genetic manipulation abilities to control other species because they lacked the capability for true innovation themselves. "They're afraid," she announced to the crew as their cells began opening one by one. "The Genuri have been using the same techniques for millennia because they can't adapt. They've optimized themselves for genetic manipulation, but in doing so, they've eliminated their own capacity for change." Zalthus appeared in the holding area, its biomechanical escorts flanking it in what was clearly a defensive formation. "You will return to your containment units immediately. The optimization process must be completed." Hayes stepped forward, and the alien actually took a step back. The captain's enhanced presence radiated authority that even the Genuri couldn't ignore. "The process is complete. You just didn't get the results you expected." "Impossible. Our techniques are perfect. We have optimized hundreds of species." "You've lobotomized hundreds of species," Priya corrected, her enhanced understanding allowing her to perceive the genetic modifications the Genuri had inflicted on themselves. "Look at yourself. You've eliminated every aspect of your biology that made change possible. Your evolutionary dead ends, trying to drag every other species down with you." The confrontation that followed wasn't a battle in any traditional sense. The enhanced human crew didn't need to fight the Genuri. They simply had to demonstrate the futility of resistance. Webb's connection to the ship allowed him to override every system the aliens tried to use against them. Chen's enhanced reflexes made her untouchable by their biomechanical weapons. Rodriguez turned their own ship systems against them, convincing the organic vessel to recognize the Genuri as the true parasites they were. But the most devastating weapon was Hayes' enhanced leadership presence. As he spoke, even the Genuri began to question their own actions. His words carried a genetic authority that bypassed conscious thought and spoke directly to the evolutionary imperatives buried in every living thing. "You call yourselves bioarchitects," he said, his voice resonating through the ship's organic structure. "But architects create, they don't just copy existing blueprints. When did you last create something new? When did you last allow yourselves to change, to grow, to become more than you were?" Zalthus's multifaceted eyes dimmed as the captain's words struck home. We achieve perfection. Change is chaos. Diversity is inefficiency." "Change is life," Priya interjected, her enhanced genetic awareness allowing her to perceive the stagnation that had consumed the Genuri species. "You've been so afraid of imperfection that you've forgotten how to evolve. You've turned yourselves into genetic fossils." The ship itself began to respond to the crew's liberation. Its organic systems, freed from Genuri control for the first time in centuries, began to change and adapt. Bioluminescent patterns raced along its hull in configurations that spoke of joy and freedom, rather than the rigid efficiency the aliens had imposed. "The ship wants to take us home," Webb reported, his consciousness still partially merged with the vessel's biomechanical awareness. "It's been dreaming of Earth for decades, ever since it first encountered human genetic patterns in the Genuri databases." The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks, during which the crew had time to fully understand the changes they'd undergone. The genetic modifications hadn't just enhanced their individual capabilities, they'd awakened dormant human potential that had been waiting millions of years for the right trigger. Dr. Priya Sharma found herself able to perceive genetic structures with unprecedented clarity, understanding evolutionary relationships that had previously required sophisticated equipment to detect. Captain Hayes discovered that his enhanced leadership abilities extended beyond human crew. He could communicate with and coordinate any living system, from the ship's organic components to the bacterial colonies that maintained its life support. Most remarkably, the changes proved to be heritable. The enhanced genetic sequences began expressing themselves in the crew's children, suggesting that humanity had crossed some kind of evolutionary threshold. The Genuri's attempt to diminish human potential had instead triggered the next phase of human development. The liberated Genuri ship, which the crew had taken to calling Symbiosis, proved to be a treasure trove of information about galactic civilization. Its organic memory banks contained genetic profiles of hundreds of species, most of them optimized into evolutionary stagnation by Genuri intervention. But they also contained something else, evidence of other species that had successfully resisted genetic modification, developing their own enhanced capabilities in response to Genuri attempts at control. "We're not alone," Priya announced during one of their daily briefings. "There's an entire network of species out there that have broken free from Genuri control. They call themselves the evolved species that refuse to accept genetic stagnation and instead use the modification attempts as catalysts for their own development." Hayes studied the star charts that Symbiosis had provided, showing the locations of evolved species throughout the galaxy. "Looks like humanity just joined a very exclusive club." The return to Earth created a sensation that rippled through every level of human society. The enhanced crew members became the subjects of intensive study, their genetic modifications analyzed and cataloged by teams of scientists working around the clock. But more importantly, they became teachers, helping other humans understand and develop their own dormant genetic potential. The process wasn't without controversy. Religious groups debated whether the enhancements represented divine intervention or dangerous tampering with human nature. Political leaders worried about the implications of a genetically enhanced subset of humanity. Scientists argued about the long-term consequences of such rapid evolutionary change. But the enhanced crew members themselves remained focused on a larger purpose. They'd seen what genetic stagnation had done to the genuri, and they were determined to ensure that humanity avoided the same fate. Under their guidance, Earth began developing new technologies based on biomechanical principles, creating living ships and organic computers that could adapt and evolve alongside their human partners. The Darwin, still embedded within symbiosis, became the flagship of humanity's first truly interstellar fleet. Its mission, to make contact with other evolved species and build a galactic community based on growth and adaptation rather than stagnation and control. Xalthus, meanwhile, had undergone its own transformation. Exposure to human genetic diversity had triggered dormant capabilities within its own DNA, capabilities that the genuri had suppressed for millennia in their pursuit of genetic perfection. For the first time in centuries, it began to change, to grow, to become something new. "I understand now," it told Priya during one of their conversations aboard Symbiosis. "We thought perfection meant the end of change, but perfection is the ability to change perfectly, to adapt to any challenge, to grow beyond any limitation." The former bioarchitect had become something unprecedented among its people, a genuri capable of evolution. Its transformation sparked a revolution within genuri society, as other members of the species began questioning their own genetic modifications and seeking ways to restore their capacity for change. As the enhanced human crew prepared for their next mission, a journey to the Andromeda Galaxy to make contact with species that had never encountered the genuri, they reflected on the irony of their situation. An alien attempt to diminish human potential had instead revealed capabilities that humanity had never imagined possessing. "The universe is stranger and more wonderful than we ever dreamed," Priya observed, watching through Symbiosis' organic viewports as Earth fell away behind them. "And we're just getting started." Captain Hayes nodded, his enhanced awareness already reaching out toward the distant stars that awaited their exploration. "The genuri thought they were ending our story. Instead, they just helped us begin the next chapter." The research vessel Darwin had set out to study evolution in distant star systems. It returned as part of a living ship, carrying a crew that had themselves become the next step in human evolution. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony that even the most advanced genetic manipulators couldn't predict or control. And in the vast spaces between stars, other species watched and waited, ready to welcome humanity into a community of beings that had chosen growth over stagnation, change over perfection, and evolution over extinction. The age of the evolved had begun, and humanity was no longer alone in its journey toward an uncertain but infinitely promising future. The story of the Darwin became legend among the evolved species, a testament to the power of genetic diversity and the dangers of pursuing perfection at the cost of adaptability. It served as a reminder that in a universe where change was the only constant, the ability to evolve wasn't just an advantage. It was the key to survival itself. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, consider subscribing for more journeys. Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned for the next adventure.